Thanks for joining us here at the Bill Mason Show. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Hey, everybody, welcome to the NRA edition. We're going to have to come to the defense of the NRA because everybody wants to poke their pokers into it right now because it's a soft target, it seems. It's a civil rights organization that they can somehow link to anything they want, and it takes away from their failures in other aspects. So when they can turn all this rioting violence into somehow the NRA supports violence, then it makes them look less awful.
Right. I mean, because you need a gun. I mean, everybody's rioting. I mean, somebody's going to come in your house. You need a gun to protect yourself.
Yeah, it's paramount. That's what the framers put it into the Constitution, and everybody says as times change, the one of the biggest arguments always was we have police forces in every city and every town, and why would you ever need a gun? And why would you need a gun that shoots more than one shot? Why would you need 10 rounds? And then it was why would you need 20 rounds? Well, now we have crowds of 300 people that are going into neighborhoods, and the police are being defunded or overwhelmed when you're in like a riot situation where there's fires on the east side of town and the west side of town, and cops have to protect the fire department and this, that, and the third, and they're spread thin. Meanwhile, you got 300 people on your lawn. Do you want a pea shooter or a slingshot? Absolutely not. I'm honestly, the things like that are available, I mean, they're not military grade weapons. That is such a myth. These AR-15s that are on the market, unless you go through special licensing, you are not going to have an M4, a military grade type of rifle. And if you do want that, you have to jump through serious hoops with the ATF. But most of the stuff that you're getting off the shelves at Cabela's or Walmart are single, not single shot, but semi-automatic. It's something that it looks scary. And the reason people buy them is because it looks scary. And guess what? When there are multiple people either coming towards you or in any situation, you want to look as scary as possible. So, the fact is that they've demonized these black rifles and they're going after them, and they have been for years. But when you look at the statistics, I mean, yes, they always highlight the school shooters, these young kids that maybe aren't thinking clearly, that for whatever reason think that their final exit's going to be with an AR-15. It's a terrible thing to do. No one wants anyone to lose their life because some kid had access to an AR-15. But the fact is, you can't put toothpaste back in the tube. There are guns on the streets that are illegal, and to leave someone else that's a tax-paying United States citizen to be unarmed when you acknowledge that there are illegal guns on the street, you defeat yourself in the argument. So anyway, I know I'm going long here.
Well, love your rack back there, John Bill.
Yes, indeedy. I mean, there is a purpose for every weapon, and also too, really quick before we show we have good videos and stuff too, but 8 million new gun owners in the United States. Get your training. Pay the money for the training. I know it seems like a big investment for your first firearm, but don't just play with it in your house. Don't just go in your backyard and think that you're okay. Make sure somebody shows you how to load and unload and where all the mechanisms are, the nomenclature, the safeties, everything. You have to really know what you're doing. I think a lot of fear-driven purchases were done out there, rightfully so. It was a very scary time for if you lived in Minnesota or if you lived in Seattle or Oregon. But the thing is, I don't want 8-point-something million people not knowing that a lot of people that have owned firearms, they do put a lot of time, effort into training, shooting, and safety. And the NRA is one of those places where you can get it all for a membership price. $30 a year, honestly, gets you a ton of information, ton of training, videos, access to stuff that you wouldn't probably have if you didn't know any better. It's a one-stop shop for gun safety, and it's NRA.org.
Yeah, so NRA, so what's going on now is the Attorney General of New York wants to dissolve the NRA.
Yeah, a civil rights organization that's funded by the members, And yes, they do lobby. They do lobby Congress. That's like this argument that like they shouldn't be able to. But if they didn't, every single like pie in the sky law that they came up with, they wouldn't be able to educate these legislators like, hey, even though it looks okay, this is what happens when it's enacted. You know, they have to show these guys that the backdoor legislation, the taxes, the increases on everything from ammunition to permitting and all this other stuff. It's a way to literally affect lower income people from jumping into the range of being able to afford a firearm and be able to learn how to use it. So it becomes a daunting task, and that's how the left has always gone after it, because they can't repeal a Second Amendment without a major like hoopla, and it would be something that's a huge deal. So how they attack it is through demonizing the NRA and adding these little levies and taxes, these little state and local things that you have to pay to get your firearms. And some of the freest states like Texas and Florida is some of the biggest, where you basically, if you are a citizen, they are going to make sure that you don't have any felonies and violence in your past, and then you are okay to own. Whereas in New York State, it could take them up to 30 to 35 days. They review social media. There's so many things that they look into that can restrict you from owning a firearm. You know, in upstate New York, like their argument for New York City is, oh, it's too populated. There's people in upstate New York that have applied for firearms, and it takes them 30 to 35 days to get a yes or a no. And then they have to appeal it. I mean, you know, some of these leftist people that go after the NRA, like I said, it's a soft target. It's a civil rights organization that really can't defend itself against these slander.
Yeah, what it is that if they didn't have NRA, the Second Amendment would be gone. It had been done.
It would have took it a long time ago.
Yes,
a really long time ago. And
yes.
And to be honest, you know, I'm a big proponent of gun ownership, and I think it's a responsibility. It's not something like, you know, a garden hose where you just turn it on and it works. I mean, you really have to know what you're doing. And I want people to go out and get the education, or even have a friend that owns firearms, at least walk you through the basics, because it's really important, because everything from where you keep it to what you do with it, it could end in disaster if it's done wrong. Right. And if it's done right, like the 93 million gun owners before the 8 million bought, you know, during the pandemic. I mean, when you look at the 93 million gun owners out there, you know, 91,999,999 don't do anything with their legally owned firearms. Mm-hmm. So the problem is that they never bring that up. You know, they never bring up the fact that, wow, these gun owners haven't done anything, you know, but these, like Chicago and Philadelphia, they always come up on the radars. It's gun violence. It is violence done with a gun, but they also have stabbings, and they also beat people with baseball bats, and they light people on fire in Philadelphia. So I really don't think that if they took the guns away, that they would stop violence, because there are violent people in these cities.
You wouldn't stop gun violence either, because other countries try to do that, and somehow the people with doing bad things gets guns.
Always. And if they don't have access to firearms, it turns to bombs, like we see in some countries. And you can make a fertilizer bomb, you know?
Or a big hatchet knife or axe
or
something.
Yeah,
so let's take a look at the Attorney General speech the other day about dissolving NRA.
All right.
We send a strong and loud message that no one is above the law. Not even the NRA. One of the most powerful organizations in this country. Just a few minutes ago, my office filed a lawsuit against the National Rifle Association to dissolve the organization in its entirety for years of self-dealing and illegal conduct that violate New York's charities law and undermine its own mission. The assets of such an organization are legally required to be used in a way that serves the interest of NRA membership and that advance the organization's charitable mission. However, for years, the NRA diverted millions and millions of dollars away from its charitable mission for personal use by senior leadership. These individuals in the NRA are charged with failing to manage the NRA's funds and failing to follow numerous state and federal laws, which contributed to the loss of more than $64 million in just 3 years. Visited the Bahamas by private air charter at least 8 times in an approximate 3-year period with his family at a cost of more than $500,000 to the NRA. He traveled on multiple luxury hunting safaris in Africa at the expense of an NRA vendor. He spent millions of dollars on unwanted travel consultants for decades. He secured a post-employment contract for himself with the NRA without board approval, currently valued at more than $17 million. He allotted several million dollars annually in NRA funds for private security costs for himself and his family without sufficient oversight on their use. These actions violated multiple laws, including the laws governing the NRA's charitable status, false reporting on annual filings with my office and the IRS. Wayne LaPierre, Woody Phillips, Joshua Powell, and John Frazier instituted a culture of self-dealing, mismanagement, and negligent oversight at the NRA that was illegal, oppressive, and fraudulent. It's clear that the NRA has been failing to carry out its stated mission for many, many years, and instead has operated as a breeding ground for greed, abuse, and brazen illegality.
All right, so what do you think about that?
I think, honestly, most organizations that, if they were to look into them,
Right.
I guarantee if you looked into the Clinton Foundation,
No.
and found where people were getting paid for various things, I'm sure you could find an infraction. But the whole time I was shaking my head. They're based in Fairfax, Virginia. She's from New York. I don't know how far the reach goes as far as jurisdiction. If there are violations in New York State, maybe she has some degree of jurisdiction over that. But as far as the members go, me being a member myself, you vote on where you want their money to go. They give you a big, huge ballot, and it says what's important to you on a scale of 1 to 5. And you go down the ballot and you rate it, and that's where they spend the money. Now, whether these guys are getting compensation packages or stuff like that I would never know as a member. But I do know that for as long as I've been a member, I've had access to free shooting events that I've gone to and had a great time because it was super safe, and there was tons of range officers, and it was really a great place for new shooters to feel comfortable around firearms. And it was something that you couldn't get anywhere else without the NRA. So her accusations that the NRA doesn't do for its members, or whatever that accusation was, saying that it's all for personal enrichment. Now, granted, I think they spend like $300 million like in lobbying. So them being a charitable organization, I think they have to get rid of the money, and what these guys are compensated, I'm really not sure. But honestly, I'm a satisfied member of the NRA. So as far as I'm concerned, if they are going to nitpick over these guys over their personal expenses, I mean, I know salesmen that are on the road that write things off like, oh, this, that, and the third. Uh, you could basically fine tooth comb almost any organization's expenses and find something.
Right.
And I think that's where they are in this game, because the NRA putting a target on that, it looks like you're doing something. So for these Democrats right now, where they're surrounded by epic failure, like their cities are in flames and their crime is through the roof, and people are reacting by buying firearms. So what they do is put a target on the NRA, and they say, oh, these guys are murderers and killers and all this other stuff with no substantiation at all.
Right, I agree. So the AG of New York is kind of reaching there. So let's take a look at Charlton Heston back in the day and see what he had to say.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first, those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call. When loss of liberty is looming, as it is now, the siren sounds first in the hearts of freedom's vanguard. The smoke in the air of our Concord bridges and Pearl Harbors is always smelled first by the farmers who come from their simple homes to find the fire and fight, because they know that sacred stuff resides in that wooden stock and blued steel, something that gives the most common man the most uncommon of freedoms. When ordinary hands can possess such an extraordinary instrument, that symbolizes the full measure of human dignity and liberty. That's why those 5 words issue an irresistible call to us all, and we must. So, as we set out this year to defeat the divisive forces that would take freedom away, I want to say those fighting words for everyone within the sound of my voice to hear and to heed, and especially for you, Mr. Gore. From my cold, dead hands,
There we go. It's classic.
Classic Heston. I mean, he was a great. I guess he was president for like 5 years, but he was one of the ones that really, if you had an argument against firearm ownership, he would sit down next to you, almost like a grandpa telling a story. Mm-hmm. And he'd be like, he'd put his arm on your shoulder, pre-coronavirus when that was okay, and he would say, let me tell you a little bit about a firearm. And, it was a weird way of softening the blow to the people that went against him, because he never really got agitated and people would be combative. And I mean, back in the 2000s, we didn't really have an Antifa presence, but there were people that were protesters that would come up to him and scream stuff in his face or whatever. And he would be like, anytime you want to go shooting, pal, you let me know. We'll go together. I'll show you a few things. He kind of laughed it off, and he was just a great guy and a great one to be the spokesman of the NRA for all those years. I mean, he did a great job.
He did. So, as relevant as it is now as it was back then.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going away, because
no.
As we're watching all of the things in local politics and global politics, people envy the United States. The people in Hong Kong are talking about they want the Second Amendment, and it wouldn't have got this far if they had the Second Amendment. There's people in Europe right now that are like, man, I wish I could own a firearm because I don't know who's coming into my kitchen in the middle of the night. I wish I didn't have just a knife, you know. So like all of these things are happening all over the world, and personal defense is coming. It's a real argument now. It used to be like you were a crazy gun nut, and now I have guys that never owned firearms before that are asking me, how do I do it? I need it. So
right. Exactly. So we have a firearm person here we're going to talk about here that needed a gun in a bad area. Let's take a look, okay?
All right.
I'm a good person. I never bothered anybody. But I can't afford a nice house in a safe neighborhood. I live in a government high-rise. Gangbangers and drug dealers walk down our halls every day. My neighbors and I were scared. We called the police, but they can't keep us safe. Some of us are too afraid to even leave our apartments. But the housing authority told me if I bought a gun to protect myself, they throw me to the streets. If I'm not free because of my address today, what makes you think you'll be free tomorrow? I marched behind Martin Luther King at Selma. I know my rights. Now I have my gun. I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
There you go. So you got to have something to protect yourself. That lady needed help, and she got a gun.
Sure. And the best part is the NRA started, actually post Civil War, but pre like civil rights movement and stuff. And the NRA was involved in helping people in communities get armed. It's not a racist organization by any means. They've always supported every single citizen the right to bear arms, whether you're black, Latino, white, American Indian. It didn't matter. Like when you go to an NRA event, there is no racial feel at all. And I've seen it. This is going back 10 years ago. There's tons of people that are just there to learn and have fun shooting, and it's blacks, Latinos, it's Asians. I mean, everybody's there, but they have a common interest, and that is firearms. And I think that's what scares the left, is that access to firearms is an equalizer. Just like they don't like Trump trying to equalize people economically, they also don't like people equalized in a I want to say force market. So like they like to have a government monopoly on force, where that's what the Second Amendment was designed for. So the government never has a monopoly on force. I mean, I know law enforcement officers that are pro Second Amendment, and you would think that they wouldn't be, the amount of times that they come into contact with other people's firearms. But for the most part, he said that citizens that safely own and operate firearms are not the problem, and they know that.
Well, it's not only for government to take power, like a leftist type government to take over our rights, but it's also for another country to invade. No one's going to invade the United States when you have all these weapons everywhere. They don't know whether they're going to get shot at or not.
Yeah, I think I don't have the exact quote, but there was an emperor from Japan who said, if we ever set foot on the continent of America, there'd be behind every blade of grass a man with a rifle. And I don't know, I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, honestly, that's how they think of American soil. Like the minute they set foot, they're going to get shot at.
Right.
But I kind of like that thing. Like I've come in contact with people from other countries, and we all think we're John Wayne and all of that stuff because they don't have access to the firearms that we do. But what they don't realize is that there is something to being American, that I know people who have become naturalized citizens from other countries. First thing they do after they become a citizen is purchase a firearm because they've always wanted to.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's the show tonight for the NRA. Do you have any last words about the what's going on with dissolving the NRA? Do you think it's going to happen?
Honestly, I think it's a way to grandstand and tie up some things in court and to look like you're relevant. For these Democrats, they have to appear like they're doing something right now, because all of the other things that are going on in these Democratic run states and cities are making them look foolish and making them look like they can't control anything. So the one thing they can control is who they harass. They control their judges and their court systems. And this is kind of like a lot of spinning wheels and a lot of smoke, but it's like a burnout. They're not going anywhere. I really don't think it's going to get anywhere. The NRA, ILA, it's the Institute for Legislative Action. They got teams of lawyers that are probably some of the best that you could ask for, and I'm not really afraid for them. It's just a way to cost the NRA money. This is another tactic of the left, that they used to sue the manufacturers, and they used to go after Remington and, all the companies that made the firearms, and they used to hold them, liable for these things. Now they're going after the NRA because they know it costs them money. It's just like a little death by 1,000 cuts attack on them, but I don't think it's going to end the NRA. And if they do have to disband, another one will start. It just won't be called the NRA. It'll be called something else, and it'll probably be the same people. I have faith in that our Second Amendment rights will be defended by the same people. I think last time I checked, the NRA had 7 million plus members, and I mean, honestly, that seems like a low number, but those are people that are trying to keep it alive. And if you can have 7 million people constantly contributing to the effort to keep it alive, it works. You watch when a hurricane happens and everybody donates $5. What's 7 million times 5? It's a lot of money. So what happens is the NRA, every time they come up against a legislative action, they say, hey, you guys want to chip in? 7 million people give $10. Boom, legal fund, good to go.
All right. Well, not only that, I mean, we need to have the NRA to keep the Second Amendment, and again, they're not going to go anywhere. So I appreciate you watching today. Please subscribe, and see you next time.
See you next time.